All right, welcome to Bet the Edge. I'm Jay Croucher here with Drew Dinsick and Brad Thomas. Thanks for joining us today, Brad. We're going to talk about PGA Championship at Valhalla, break it down from an array of angles, and then Drew and I are going to close out talking the Preakness Stakes. But what's going on, Brad? How have you been, mate?
Hey, I've been pretty good. Soccer season's winding down. We're at golf's second major, so it feels pretty busy, but it's also pretty exciting. A lot of good bets to place and a lot of sports to watch in general. You know, this is kind of the time of year where people are like, sports suck, but for me, it's super exciting.
Yep, there's a lot going on. We're recording as the second half of Tottenham Man City has kicked off after a bizarre and extremely tense first half. So Premier League title will get decided in the next 45 minutes, most likely. But let's not worry about North London for now and instead go to Valhalla. Brad, this golf course, I know it rewards distance, but what particularly are you factoring in when you're pricing guys out?
Yeah, you said it. Distance is really key here, but additionally, accuracy, right? These fairways are really, really tiny and the rough is thick. So generally, when you think about a golf course profile that's long and mean, you think about guys like, I don't know, Thigala and Tony Finau, but not really this week at Valhalla. You want to think more about guys who are accurate off the tee as well as long, because once you hit the rough, you know, it's pretty tough. But I did hear someone say, and I have to mention it, the fairways are so thin that everyone's going to miss the fairways. So then you want the guys who hit it so much further that instead of them having maybe a 4 or 5 iron in their hand trying to drive that through thick rough, they have something like a 7 iron, maybe even as low as a gap wedge, because they're absolutely bombing it, which kind of makes the bomb and gouge mentality a little bit more realistic. But if you have just one of those guys like a Xander Schauffele who's just hitting fairway after fairway and he's still averaging over 314 yards per drive, they're going to be one of those guys you want to check first.
I'm surprised the market's not a little warmer for Schauffele because of that in particular. Course tips out at over 7,600 yards. Almost all of the premier shots, or like the shots that matter, are tee shots on the long par fours. And if you're doing well at that department, I think you're going to have a lovely week. In general, anything to be concerned about with the weather in Louisville this week, or are we expecting a relatively neutral condition and no wave bias?
A little bit of weather that's going to pop up. I didn't see a super wave bias. It's hard with the wave bias in majors, because they basically try to get these guys in the best conditions they can, or the most fair conditions. I will say that if this course does get softer, it does kind of worry me for the guys who aren't hitting the ball very far because they're not getting that needed rollout. You think about most of the guys who aren't hitting the ball far, like the Denny McCarthy's guys. He's getting a little bit of help because he's actually hitting in the fairway. Now, if you take a little bit of that away, it kind of hurts them. And it's also important to note that they're using Zoysia grass, which generally bakes out a little bit harder, makes it a little bit firmer. So now you make that a little more wetter. The rain has come, then those shorter guys aren't getting remotely nearly as much rollout, and it kind of stinks. Like, they could be having like approach shots like 210. I was looking at some data here. Course tour average is like 175 for approaches for like your semi-long courses. There are more approaches from 200 here than generally every course on the PGA Tour, which is kind of important to note for those little hitters. They're going to be having 230 into some of these holes.
Let's talk about the favorites. Scottie Scheffler, the favorite, as is his God-given right at this point. He's plus 450, implies a 18% chance to win the tournament. Right behind him, though, Rory McIlroy plus 750, coming off a couple of wins after a little bit of a shaky start, but he has found himself of late. What do you think of how both of these guys are priced, Brad?
I'm happy they're priced low. I think they're actually priced fair, right? Scottie Scheffler, best golfer in the world by a long mile. Rory McIlroy, he's playing with like this bravado that he has where he knows he's going to absolutely smoke his drive. It's going to be in the middle of the fairway, and he's going to put tremendous pressure. But it's kind of funny. They have this parallel outside of them both winning crazy amounts of golf tournaments recently, but they have this parallel where both of them struggled with their putters, and that was kind of what was keeping them back from just winning all the time. And then if we look at Rory McIlroy's last 2 wins, we look at Scottie Scheffler since he switched to the Spider putter. It's the putting of both these guys. I know that Rory told Scottie to switch, and then Rory got help from Faxon on his putting, but whatever they did, it's made them into legitimate threats to win. Now, one thing we should talk about is their strokes gained home life. Both of them have aspects in their lives that are going to affect their mentality. Number one, Scottie Scheffler's wife gave birth to their first child. And I use this correlation, and I'm going to stick with it regardless of how rude it might be. And if he comes at me, he comes at me. But we think about a guy like a Tyreek Hill, and I'm only using him because of the amount of children they had in such a short span, or we use a Scottie Scheffler, right? Yeah. First child. I think that Tyreek Hill would delegate more. So that's a sensitive way to say it. He would delegate more, where Scottie Scheffler would want to be very hands-on and be there for his wife. That plays into a factor. You can't calculate those kinds of things with any numerical metric. It's impossible, right? But golf is 95% mental. If he has that chink in his armor this week, it could be because of the child. Less sleep, even if he's not taking care of the child, right? As a new dad, you have that mentality of, is my child okay? Is my child breathing? Even when you're not even in the same room, and Scottie Scheffler could have that. Now we talk about Rory McIlroy. Listen, I'm not TMZ. I'm not breaking news here. He filed for a divorce, right? I don't know what his home life is like, and I'm not even going to begin to guess. But that's just another thing that kind of goes through our minds as golf handicappers. Like, how does that affect his play? Some say, it's helping him out, less to worry about, weight off his shoulders. That's why he's winning. Others say, why are you dropping that bomb the week of a major when you haven't won a major since 2014? Like, so those are we can't quantify, but I think it's important to talk about, especially when you're laying less than 8-1 on either of these guys.
Yeah, 2014. Yeah.
What?
2000. I mean, yeah. We'll be honest. Tyreek Hill is delegating all responsibilities. The 2014 you said is the last time Rory won a major.
Yeah, that was off the top of my head. Yeah, it was 2014 at this course, I believe it was too. Yes. Yeah, and like, listen, I will be honest. I've probably made like 3 or 4 parlays with soccer bets with Rory, with action on Rory, just because he fits the absolute profile. I would prefer he lost to Xander last week, though, because winning 3 in a row and with all the pressure of the major is just so hard. And now you're giving me less than 10-1. We probably would have got him at like 9.5-1 had he not won last week as well.
Yeah, no, it's a fair point, and I mean, it doesn't even have to be a mental distraction for these guys. It can literally just be as simple as, for Scheffler at least, taking you out of your rhythm. Like, you want to see what past performances look like for a guy who is absolutely in rhythm. Go look at Scottie Scheffler's 4 wins in 5 weeks. With the one that he didn't win, he got tied second. Like, he was absolutely unstoppable before taking a short break, and whether he's able to carry that form into this tournament is a huge question mark. I mean, you got to wonder how much this matters compared to everything else that's going on in his life, like winning another Masters. But I digress. The prices really is kind of what turns me off on these guys. Like, it's a bigger field than the Masters. There are reasons, things can go a little bit of sideways for these guys. And even if you just throw your hands up and say, well, these are dead fair prices, I think it makes sense to at least, kind of gauge how the rest of the field shapes up, and either take a shot on these guys live if there is a better price available and you still think they can close on the field, or just stay away entirely and let try to find another way to make money on this thing. But it is fascinating to me that this was Roy's last major, and it was at PGA. He got it, by the way, by a stroke over Phil Mickelson. Who I didn't remember had an especially good performance here, but he was good. The other, 2 times it was contested here were, back in the day, Tiger Woods won in 2000, and I can't remember the first winner here, but it was back in the 90s. So very cool course, though, designed by Jack Nicklaus, and a lot of kind of Louisville heritage there. So Jay and I, of course, very familiar with Louisville, our home away from home. the sights and sounds in the Bourbon Trail are all going to be live, I'm sure, this weekend. So very fired up for that. If you had to take a head-to-head on these guys between Rory and Scheffler at price, you interested in Rory, or you think Scheffler's just got him in his bag?
I'm taking Scottie.
Okay.
Listen, Scottie Scheffler will probably finish top 5. He'll probably be in contention come Sunday, and it'll be maybe one bad hole that would keep him from winning. Now, Rory, when he did win in 2014, I do remember how great a form he was in. So it is scary, but there's just so much that can go wrong. If we remember last Sunday correctly at Quail Hollow, there was a time in that front 9 where McIlroy was shaky. He even on the first hole, he mishit his iron. Then I think on the 3rd hole, mishit his iron. He on the short par 4, was at 6, he drove it into the trees and got a lucky break where it rolled through the pines. So I just think the chance of a blow up between the two is more likely on Rory than Scottie.
I think that.
Yeah, that's fair. Saar just killed Kevin De Bruyne, by the way, as we're speaking. I think De Bruyne is dead. He seems to get injured in every single big game. To your point, Brad, about strokes gained home life, which you threw by me initially like a Mason Miller fastball, because I was watching Haaland score a tap in. That kind of stuff is so difficult to price into one's handicap, and because it comes up all the time, like all of these very abstract subjective factors, like when Ben Simmons and Joel Embiid were playing together, it didn't seem like they liked each other. Did that matter? Did that impact the Sixers' chances to win championship? Kobe and Shaq definitely didn't like each other. They won 3 straight titles. So with the McIlroy thing, I don't think that's gonna. The thing is like if you're filing for divorce, probably be in that process for a while. He's just won 2 tournaments anyway, so I would not. I think that's going to be fine. With the Scheffler thing, I would view it like this: if you were on Scottie Scheffler to win the PGA Championship, say like a month ago when he was on top of the world, what you would want is for things to continue in his life exactly as they were, and to have no disruptions whatsoever, and just to continue exact day like the day before. And look, I don't think that Scottie Scheffler's price should double or whatever because he's had a kid, but certainly it maybe introduces a tiny bit of variance that maybe it is not correct to weigh that against him in any way, but it's just different, and you don't want difference when you're on top of the world, effectively. Anyway, we're going to jump into some other guys at the top of the odds board, but firstly, Olympic champion Sydney McLaughlin-Levrone leads a star-studded crowd at the LA Grand Prix this weekend. Watch America's top track stars on Saturday at 3 p.m. Eastern as they continue their run-up to the Summer Games in Paris, only on NBC and Peacock. Let's talk about some of the LIV guys, Brad. Let's start with Brooks Koepka, who we must discuss at every major, given that statistically he is the guy who sees the biggest lift between his non-major performance and his major performances. The other guy in that bucket is Will Zalatoris. But Koepka's 14-1 to win. I think that is maybe a little bit short, given that if we all obsess about his majors performance, his past 2 majors, he's come 45th and 64th. So it's not like every single time he rises to the occasion, but this course is probably suited to him and his distance, Brad. So what do you think about Koepka?
To be completely transparent, I took Koepka at 20-1 when the live numbers came out. And I said to anybody who was following, 15 was my cutoff. It's interesting to talk about Brooks Koepka in terms of course fit. And there's correlation as to why he consistently wins PGA championships. Golfers complain about it. Maybe fans can complain about it as well. But the style of PGA championship courses are all very similar. At least they have been maybe over the past 6 to 10 years. That's why he keeps winning them, because they have the exact same style. They're narrow, they're long, generally baked out, or they're firm and fast, which is basically the same thing in terms of ball flight or ball rollout. And Brooks is just the kind of guy mentally who dials in for majors. Also, he's playing good golf. And I heard someone say it's hard to gauge what these golfers are doing on LIV. We have data now. We have strokes gained data, and his golfer profile looks really good. He was struggling with his putter early in the LIV golf season, which I wouldn't have known, without that data, but now it looks like that's corrected. He's driving the ball tremendously, and he's gaining a ton of strokes on approach. When Brooks generally wins majors, it's because he's playing well, or when he plays well in majors. We'll talk about 2 years ago at the Masters. He was coming off a win. He was coming off of, I think his tournament before that was like a T5 or T6. And then he went and he played really well at the Masters and ran out of gas, or Jon Rahm just stepped on his throat in the second round. That's a really big correlation. Whether we want to talk about his price being right, I don't know. I really feel like 15 is like a sharp cutoff, because just the value from 20 is such a big difference to 14, where I'd probably just kind of want to pass at that number.
Okay. Yeah, I'm kind of with you. I think the cutoff is long behind us, and 14-1 is too rich. The other player in the LIV space who's noteworthy to talk about and who's drifting, particularly relative to the price we saw at the Masters, is Mr. Jon Rahm. Now, to be again perfectly candid, Jon Rahm cost me a lot of money in Augusta, and if he continues to stink on LIV and just ultimately has a lackluster 2024 campaign, I'm not going to be sad because I do bear a grudge for Mr. Rahm. But do you think that what we saw from him at Augusta was sort of where he is now with his state of his game, or do you think there were specific things going on that week that kind of begot that performance, and that he is actually going to be a factor here?
I will say two things. One, it could have just been what happened when you play Augusta and you don't start with your best stuff. If we remember, what was it, 2 years ago when he won, he didn't start off great and was able to flip the switch. Well, sometimes that switch doesn't happen. Augusta is one of those courses that kind of snatches your soul, where if things aren't going right or you're misplacing your shots, it's the difference between par and double bogey. I don't think that's going to be as prevalent here, just because it doesn't have the undulation, and it's not as penal in terms of the undulation going into hazards and stuff like that, or even the greens being really difficult to putt on. And number two, Drew, to your point, I alluded to this before the Masters, that Jon Rahm, if you look at all of his victories, he's kind of the guy that needs to play a lot of golf and be kind of hot coming in. Mm-hmm. But if Jon Rahm were to win at, I don't even know how to pronounce, let's just use Singapore. I know how to pronounce that. If he would have won at Singapore, or he would have won at Doral, his price wouldn't have been 20 or 18-1. He would have been plus 850 by the time the market drove him down. And no one is watching. A lot of people aren't watching LIV saying who finished T5, who finished T4, unless you have money on it. We're in a world now where they're watching LIV to know who won the tournament. That is it. And since Jon Rahm's not winning tournaments, he's not getting that kind of, I would say, more casual push on the market. But his number did drop, right? His number was around 22-1, and it's all the way down to 18. I was someone who bet on it because, if we're being honest, Drew, despite Xander Schauffele being a better course fit, would you rather trust Xander Schauffele with a 2-stroke lead on Sunday at a major, or Jon Rahm? And I haven't seen Xander Schauffele close a tournament. He's converted one 54-hole lead in his career. One. That's just, why would I pay 14-1 on a Xander when I can get a Jon Rahm at 18-1?
That makes sense to me.
I feel like Xander Schauffele has become like the Jason Tatum of golf, where he's got all the skills, he's got everything you would want, just hasn't quite clinched it yet, and I think it will happen. Certainly, you like Tatum's chances more as a minus 135 favorite to win the title than Xander Schauffele at 14-1 this week. Oh, yeah. Brad, it doesn't sit right with me that Jon Rahm is a longer price to win a major than Brooks Koepka, and I understand Koepka's record. I understand that he won PGA Championship last year, but I'm old enough to remember when Jon Rahm was going off at plus 600 to win tournaments. Not that long ago, like a couple of years ago, but not that long ago. And meanwhile, I'm also old enough to remember when Brooks Koepka, like a year ago, was going off at 50-1 to win tournaments. So do you think that the market is a little bit too weighted to recency of a lot of tournaments that perhaps Jon Rahm doesn't care about as much as he's going to care about the PGA Championship?
Yeah, I think it happens way too often. Personally, I've bet 3 golfers to repeat the tournament they've won the year before this season, and it's only happened once this season. And I don't care that they're at different courses. I'm just going to use this information because it's really relevant. Last year, I think there were 4 golfers to repeat, and that was a high number, 3 or 4. It just doesn't happen that often because number one, it's hard to win a tournament. Number two, it's hard to repeat at the major that you're playing in, regardless if it's the same course or not. And recency bias is a killer. It will leave you broke in the betting landscape. That's the reason why when you see a sports book price a guy like let's use Derek White. Derek White goes off for 30 points in the game before when his original line was 15.5. That's the reason why the books are going to make his next line 16 or 17.5. And most of the times he's not going to hit that just because recency bias influences our numbers and it influences our decisions. That's why I like Rahm way more. And that's why I also was saying like Brooks at 14-1, guys. Like, are we being serious? Like, if you were to take these guys and you were to say just pound for pound, skill set for skill set, who is the more talented golfer? I think we could probably get like a 90% voting percentage on Jon Rahm. So why are you paying $4 less for Brooks Koepka, who has to defend his title?
I mean, the answer is I think they just want to write bets that are good for the house on Brooks Koepka, which they're going to do. That's my guess. Who do you think finishes top LIV out of this group? Because obviously, these guys are all playing fairly well, and it does feel like they're a little less, kind of put through the ringer with the LIV schedule compared to the PGA Tour schedule. Is there a guy that really stands out that you think can be the top of the LIV pile?
These prices kind of stink, right? But pricing is kind of reflective on how guys will perform. So they're telling you that Brooks Koepka is more likely to win the tournament, yet has the same price as Jon Rahm as top LIV golfer. If I were just to go from just sheer value, I'd probably take Joaquin Niemann. I think he's 9. Oh, I think that number is different now. Okay, it's 6.5 to 1. I mean, so plus 650 is different than 9 to 1. That number got driven down a little bit. So that changes my mentality. No, I wouldn't bet any of these markets. It looks like the numbers that I saw at the Open, they were a little bit wider. Now it looks like they're pretty condensed, which kind of sucks the value out of it. But I think Jon Rahm finishes as the top LIV golfer without pricing attached to it.
Yep, no, that's reasonable. Sometimes the best bet in a market, in most markets, most of the time is no bet at all. So I like the approach there, Brad. Before we let you go, in terms of long shots, got some big-ish names at longer prices in the market. Any long shots that you like at Valhalla?
Yeah, before we get into long shots, I do want to say that hard golf courses, hard tournaments, long shots are harder to hit because generally the skill set is more of the more rounded or this crazy long golfer, and those guys are generally the top of the names boards. But there were a couple names that struck out. Number one, Justin Thomas. We already highlighted where this golf tournament is at. That's where he's from, but he's also playing much better golf. He's not in the same form that he was at the PGA Championship when he won it. He wasn't just racking up top 10s, but he's kind of turned a leaf, right? Last year was a dreadful year. If you guys follow Justin Thomas, he has a goal sheet. I don't think he hit a single goal, and generally he hits like 7 out of 10. He didn't hit a single goal. This year, he's starting to play better. I think he will win a tournament at 50-1, 40-1. That's fine. I went with Benny Hahn. Ben Hahn is at 66-1. Dude has been playing phenomenal golf, and he actually has the course makeup that you want. Really long for the tee. I think over the last 36 rounds, he's like 4th or 5th in driving distance. Fairly accurate, 34th, something like that. But also, I think he's at this price in his form. When you combine his skill set and form, it just doesn't make sense. Sepp Straka, I probably wouldn't play him under 100-1, but I played him at 100-1. I think he's down to 90. Really accurate. He's long enough, and his form, especially at Augusta, was really nice. And the last name on this list that I took in the outright market, I also took him to finish top 20 because his price was nuts. Dean Burmeister, I took him at 120-1. Dude has everything you need, right? Crazy long off the tee, really good form. He's already won on LIV this season. He already picked up 2 other wins on the DP World Tour. Granted, it was like the Johannesburg Open and the South African Open, not the craziest of strong fields, but winning is winning, especially when you're doing it at the highest level.
Yep. No, I like the looks, Brad. I'm glad we got in some Dean Burmese to chat to go with some Jason Tatum and Derek White chat in our PGA Championship preview. We will let you go now, Brad, but thanks very much for joining us. Can you let people know what you're going to be working on leading up to the PGA Championship and, of course, where everyone can follow you on social media?
Yeah, I will be posting my video for this. It'll give me a little bit more of a breakdown. We also have Going for the Green. That's going to be on the NBC Sports website. And you can find me on X at Mr. Brad Thomas. Thanks for having me, y'all.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Brad. All right. The second leg of the Triple Crown will be run on Saturday. Watch the Preakness Stakes at Pimlico Racecourse. The action starts at 4:30 p.m. Eastern on NBC and Peacock. All right, Drew. Let's talk about the Preakness. As you know, more of a humans type of operator. So I'm going to hand you the chef's hat. What are you looking for at the Preakness stage?
Well, the Black-Eyed Susan is our signature drink, so we'll be looking for some of those this weekend. The draw was yesterday, and it was very favorable for the favorite, I have to say. Our favorite in this race is none other than Muth, M-U-T-H, Muth, and Muth is he drew the 4. What's important about drawing the 4 for Muth is that the inside of him, 1, 2, and 3, those are all 3 horses that like to be off the pace. And in particular, 2 and 3 are horses that are more of a, stalker closer type than they're even going to be pressing. So Muth has if he can get a break and Juan Hernandez takes him to the rail, he probably has a decent opportunity to be number 1, the pace setter in this race. And then number 2, kind of have the easiest ride with the least amount of, kind of having to navigate a field. Muth is the winner of the Arkansas Derby. And if you watched the Arkansas Derby, you would have said, well, he was much the best. And you know what else, Jay? Mystic Dan was in the Arkansas Derby, and Mystic Dan just won the Kentucky Derby. So Mystic Dan is, he is in this race. He drew the 5, and he has his work cut out for him to be able to get the better of Muth this time, what he couldn't do last time. These two went head to head. And I think Mystic Dan is, at this point, looking at his prices, he's going to be overbet. People want to have a little bit of skin just in case he wins the race and he goes on a Triple Crown pursuit. There's a bit of an overlay with the there's an overbet scenario here for Mystic Dan, and so he's going to be a toss for me, particularly at price. We're seeing like 5s to 2s, and it wouldn't shock me if he goes off even shorter than that, like maybe in the 2 to 1 range. Muth right now is 8 to 5. I think he probably goes off in the 1 to 1 range, maybe even shorter. My fare on him is actually shorter. I think he is clearly the winner of this race, at least looking at the way it's constructed. The likely other speed in this race going out with Muth is going to be the other Bob Baffert horse in the race, Imagination. And Imagination drew the 9 outside. He's going to have his work cut out for him to get on the lead with Muth. And Imagination, he's a second runner type of horse for me. I don't think he is your likely winner in this race, but he could definitely be in the mix to hit the board. The Preakness is a shorter race than the Kentucky Derby. It's only 1 mile and 3/16 compared to the 1.25 mile they run at Churchill Downs. And so for that reason, the horses that are on or near the lead tend to do quite well. It is not necessarily a closer's race, which matters for the other horse that's going to be overbet, and that is the 3 Catching Freedom. Brad Cox brings Catching Freedom here after being a very popular pick to win the Derby. Freedom couldn't get the better of Mystic Dan there, despite having what I thought at least was a better opportunity in terms of a trip. And so I'm not exactly sure what in 2 weeks turns him around to being the potential winner of this race. In general, the horses that ran in the Derby and the 2-week turnaround is asking a lot. So Catching Freedom, Mystic Dan, and Just Steel all qualify for kind of low consideration on those grounds. And then, of course, Seize the Gray in the 6th. He won the Pat Day Mile on Derby Day. So he has a 2-week turnaround as well. So I think I'm mostly shopping for prices to go under Muth in this race. and I'm looking for horses that are a little bit fresher and have a little bit more of a potential for progression. And the horse that really stands out in that regard is the 8-horse Tuscan Gold. Tuscan Gold, kind of exactly in the mold of your cloud computing, of your early voting. Chad Brown, kind of identifies a horse that he thinks says, kind of bet more, he wants a mile and 3/16, not a mile and a quarter. He wants a smaller field. He doesn't want a 20-horse field, and he saves that horse to be fresh for this race. And I think Tuscan Gold is surely that horse this year. And so I think, my exact is going to be the 4 over the 8. And then in my exotics, I'm going to probably put some of the longer shots and hope we hit a bomb with the likes of a 1 or a 2 or a 9 down there. And 9 wouldn't be a bomb, but at least give us a little bit better price. So 4 over 8 for me in the Preakness. And, if Tuscan Gold has a run in him that shocks the world and beats the Muth, I don't think we should be completely surprised. But really and truly, what Bob Baffert is bringing into this race in terms of a monster horse is worth paying attention to.
Okay. Tuscan Gold, exactly the mold. Very good, Drew. Before we sign off, I think, because some people might be interested, myself included, can you shed some light on, I guess, like the market making process around races like this? Because I don't really know. In Australia with horse racing, there's more than this, but there's kind of one big bettor who shapes a lot of the market. I won't go into specific details, but he's known as the doctor. And so a lot of it comes from that. I know a lot of horse racing pricing is like, there is a lot of information traded about the health statuses of given horses. How much of it is that, and how much of it is, being able to quantify prior form and specific things that you're looking for in a horse?
Yeah, so this is the type of race that's almost like the process to coming up with a price could not be more different than the one we just talked about in the Derby. The Kentucky Derby futures book is open for like 4 months before the race starts. So you can take some super long shots before you even seen them run as 3-year-olds. And a lot of the speculation is informed by what you see as 2-year-olds, and just in general, kind of trying to project out based on trainer, based on jockey, based on what the connections are telling you, who is going to be in form, who is pointing to that race being the kind of the pinnacle of their spring. The Preakness is different, and you don't know the field. We didn't know it was even going to be a 9-horse field until yesterday. Like, this comes together quickly, right? There is no long-term futures book with high liquidity that really helps shape the perception of what fair prices should be here. And so what happens in terms of making fair is the 2 pieces of information that matter the most the week of the Preakness are the draw, which is probably doesn't matter a ton unless it's good for the favorite, which in this case it was, and then the morning line, which is to say that the track master and the group of professionals who are especially familiar with horse racing, they evaluate speed, they evaluate past performance, they look at kind of the shape of this race, and they come up with a morning line, which is their early guess at what fair prices ought to be, with including a little bit of a fluff for the takeout. And from there it gets shaped by just the betting public, and if you can find in general, I would say fixed odds pools, which from what I also understand is coming to the United States legal shops relatively quickly. I would expect that you're going to be able to get prices on horses like Muth, on horses like Catching Freedom and Mystic Dan, that are going to be better right this minute than they're going to be on Saturday, because the betting into the close is usually fueled by the racetrack, the people at the track who are literally just firing enormous amounts of volume into the close, and that there can be funky impacts on price that surprise you. Mattress Mac shows up and put $1 million on a given horse. That's going to completely change the shape of the pool, and you're not going to know that until you see the odds as the race is running. So there are a lot of moving parts here, but for the Preakness in particular, I think at least the morning line that comes out when the draw is available tends to be sort of the key indicator that anchors a lot of people to what expected fare would be.
Okay, no, that's interesting. That makes a lot of sense. The Preakness will be Saturday, 4:30 p.m. On NBC and Peacock. Before we get out of here, let's do a little quick chat about Dallas OKC. Game 4 was one of the more unexpected results that I've seen, just based on how the game was unfolding. I mean, OKC, it felt like they spent the whole game down between 8 and 12 points. And when they were down 8, it felt like 18 because they were just stuck in the mud. And then Shai Gilgeous-Alexander puts his God cape on in the last quarter, just starts draining every mid-range jump shot. And I think they figured some things out on defense as well, and they get out of there with a win. Now they're 2-2. I don't understand the series price, Drew, because as we speak, and I understand that there are more factors to go into it than this, but as we speak, Game 5, the Nuggets are -174 on the money line at home, and the Thunder are -178 on the money line at home. And yet to win the series, the Nuggets are -180 and the Thunder are -140. So how does that make sense?
It doesn't.
No.
I think that there's a little bit of shade built into the series price in favor of the Mavericks because they are a well-supported team, really. And the expectation of what a Game 7 price is going to be in Denver versus what a Game 7 price is going to be in Oklahoma City is not the same, right? I don't think you're going to see this same book. And I know that I actually would kind of disagree. I think the longer we go into the OK series, the less I'm confident that Luka's going to be a factor, whereas the market expects him to show up and be put on his God cape in Game 7. And okay, good luck with that. But I look at the Nuggets and I think the longer that series goes, the more questions I have about Jamal Murray being in the same sort of state we saw in Game 2. And so, I kind of disagree with both. I think OKC should be a heavier favorite, and I don't mind taking on Minnesota at that price. So I think that there's directional bias in both directions because there's an expectation that the best player in the series in Dallas, OKC, plays for Dallas, which means Game 7 is going to be in his hand. And the best player in the series between Minnesota and Denver is Nikola Jokic. So Game 7 is going to be in his hand if it gets there. Yeah, I'm against both of those concepts, I think. And OKC, honestly, what they did yesterday proved so much to me that this young team is like learning on the fly, and that should scare anyone who doesn't have any OKC exposure to win the West.
Yeah, it's funny with OKC because it was very impressive, but I think it was mainly impressive because of what Shai did individually. Yeah, sure. And also, like, Chet Holmgren, I think, is having a very good series overall, and Cason Wallace has been fantastic. And then I feel like everyone else has been pretty bad. Like Lou Dort was better and made some key shots. Jalen Williams has been atrocious this series, and he is OKC's upside, where he's a lot better than this. Like Jalen Williams should be I don't think he's quite as good as Kyrie Irving, but he should be close to playing that matchup to a draw. And I know Kyrie hasn't been amazing either, but he just looks lost. I thought that the OKC figured something out in the fourth quarter where they decided and they acknowledged that we cannot finish at the rim on this Dallas rim protection, and we're going to start to drive no longer with the intention to finish at the rim and just bin the rim entirely and drive to create mid-range shots and to create open threes. And when they did that, all of a sudden, it's not Jalen Williams just throwing his body, kind of like a guard Karl Anthony Towns style, just flailing limbs at the rim and getting blocked. There was just a bit more of a plan. And I think that the fact that they got out of that 2-2 with Luka's knee, which I just don't think that you can be confident is going to get better, given that he's played now, he's played 11 games in the playoffs and probably played at his level in one of them, Game 5 against the Clippers. That was probably it. I know he made some threes in Game 2, but he still didn't look right physically in OKC. So I think that Oklahoma City are the slightly better team. I think they have, I know they have 2 out of 3 at home. So I just don't think that -140, I don't think -150 or -160. I don't think those are coherent prices either. So I think that they are a bet. I get why Denver are bigger favorites just because Denver's home court is the biggest home court advantage in the league. I've got 2 out of 3, but I don't think the disparity makes total sense. No. As Heung-Min Son misses a breakaway to win the title for Arsenal. But yeah, I mean, it's a fascinating series, and I don't know if it is OKC Denver in the next series. I think that is going to look completely different because I think that OKC are going to have a lot. It's going to be a lot easier for them to score without Dallas's rim protection there. Also think their defense is going to look a lot worse against Co. So anyway, we're not there yet, but OKC series price is a bet for me.
Strongly agree. And honestly, credit to Jalen Williams and Lou Dort for as poor as fundamentally as gross and as poor as their offense was. They at least kept playing and kept trying. Can't say the same for Giddey. And speaking of bad performances, Coach of the Year Mark Daigneault. What are we doing here, buddy? What's we can make a change anytime we want, and don't have to put Giddey back out there to do that again. I think ultimately, a young team figuring it out and fighting through it and coming up with that hard fought win, because it felt amazing to see and surprising to see because of how bad, relatively how bad it was before the fourth quarter comeback, right? They just looked lost. And then all of a sudden it was like, well, how does a team that looks like that play like this? What is happening? And then maybe even more than that, teams that are inexperienced, that's usually when they fold it up. They capitulate. They don't fight through it. They complain about the reffing. They find excuses for the reason it didn't work out. They don't just kind of put their heads down and go. And that's what the Thunder did, and it was cool to see.
Yep. No, I agree. And what I want from Daigneault, and he's arguably in better position than me to know what the Oklahoma City Thunder need to do to win this series. But I want 42 minutes from each of Shea and Jalen, 40 minutes each from Dort and Chet. I think that's pretty locked in. That'll happen. I want 30 minutes from Case and Wallace. And I understand everyone seems to just start and play 40 minutes or whatever. He doesn't play. He's never played that much in an NBA game, I don't think. So it's probably hard to scale him up to 40 immediately. But he is the fifth guy on the team. And he's the one who I think should start, I think should close, and he needs to play more minutes. And then you have the 8 non-Chet minutes go to Jalen Williams, and then you divvy up, the remainder between Giddey, Wiggins, who, by the way, was terrible last night. Yeah. Giddey was bad. Wiggins was maybe even worse. And then Isaiah Joe as well. But, I think OKC are going to win this series because of Luka's health state, basically. I think that's the main factor, but I don't think that's getting better. And I think that OKC have figured some things out, and I think they're going to win. Don't think it's a lock or anything close, but I think they should be more favored than the minus 140 I'm seeing in the market right now. All right, we are done. Don't forget to check out NBCSports.com for more information to help you with your wagers. Thanks to those of you watching on the NBC Sports YouTube channel. If you're listening to us in podcast form, don't forget to rate and subscribe. Also a reminder to find all your favorite NBC Sports shows on Amazon Music. Just head to amazon.com/NBC Sports. From Jay Croucher and Drew Dinsick, we'll see you soon.